Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
Education Corner podcast would like to welcome Mr. James Priory from Tonbridge in Kent, Mrs. Emma McKendrick from Downe House in Berkshire, Mr. Dominic Oliver from Lancing College in Sussex, and Mr. Stephen Haslehurst, Vice Principal at Duke of York's State Boarding School. It's wonderful to have you all here representing the different aspects of boarding school and the provisions that you offer for parents and families in the UK. And the first thing I'd like to ask is if you could introduce your school and the boarding provision that you offer families.
Thank you very much indeed. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about Tonbridge. I suppose that we see ourselves really as one of UK's leading boarding and day schools, and a school that has a reputation for providing a world-class education specifically for boys, which is very much our heritage and the area in which we innovate as a school. But that world-class education, I think, is also very much attributable to the boarding ethos that the school has. And that's really quite a defining feature for us as a school. And one of the other things that we talk about here, which I guess goes to the ethos of the school, is E.M. Forster, a former pupil, his kind of well-known phrase, only connect. And for us, thinking about boarding, it's about being a school in which you make intellectual connections, but Only Connect is also very much about human connections and relationships too. And it's really those relationships that I think go to the heart of why this is a high-performing, but fundamentally a very happy school.
And Emma?
Boarding provision at Downe, we're about 580 girls in the school. The vast majority of them are boarders, and most of our boarders are full-time boarders, so we have a 24/7 provision, but girls do have the opportunity to go home at weekends if they would like to, as long as they meet their commitments. So we have matches on Saturday afternoon, usual chapel and activities on Sunday, but for some girls, they will go home at weekends, and that's absolutely right for them, but the vast majority will stay in. We also have at the bottom of the school, so for our years 7 and 8s, as they transition into boarding, they can do a sort of shorter boarding week so that they don't have to go straight into full boarding. So if they want to start with just 3 or 4 days and work up to the boarding at 13 plus, that is absolutely fine. And we have about 14% who are day students as well. But the aim for us is very much to have a full boarding and really make use of the weekends as well.
So my name's Dominic Oliver. I'm lucky enough to be the head here at Lancing College. We're celebrating our 175th year of offering a boarding education. We're mixed. We have been in part since the 70s when girls joined in the sixth form, been fully co-educational since the year 2000. We're not quite 50-50 boys, girls, but not very far off. We've got a school of 10 houses, 7 of which are boarding, and they're roughly split between boys and girls. Boarding right at the heart of how we work, whether you're a day or boarding parent, and underpins how we function in everything that we do. And we're particularly proud of our pastoral care, and that's the basis on which everybody thrives here. And the Independent Schools Inspectorate have just come and they've just told us that our pastoral care is outstanding. They've awarded it this special gold star of significant strength.
And Stephen?
So I'm Stephen Haslehurst. I'm one of the Vice Principals at the Duke of York's Royal Military School. Sometimes people hear the word military in the name of the school and think we're one of those American boot camps or it's press-ups before breakfast. We are not. We are a normal secondary school. We're co-educational. We've got roughly 500 students, and we're a fully boarding school. So all of our students are boarders. We don't have any day students, and we just have a handful really of weekly boarders. We've got 12 houses across the 150-acre site, including a large sixth form house, which has got twin and single rooms. And as with most boarding schools, we pride ourselves on the pastoral care that we offer and the all-round education, stretching through the day, over the weekends, evenings, and so on.
That's fantastic. What do you feel are the advantages to boys or girls of single-sex boarding?
So the boys belong to a house system, which is there to give them a sense of identity within the larger community of the school. They experience, therefore, physically a house, a base, which is there setting their home within the kind of wider environment of the school. And for me, this is the counterintuitive thing about being a school that specialises in educating boys, is that actually what we're doing here is actually enabling the boys to be themselves, not simply define themselves as being boys. Being in a school that has a strong boarding character, we have a longer day. We have time in which everybody gets involved in the co-curricular activities or the super-curricular clubs and societies. And that's not something, therefore, that people just kind of opt in for if they want to, but otherwise go home. It's very much part of what everybody is experiencing and contributing to for everyone's benefit, is a school where you make the most of the opportunities available to you. And I think for boys, our experience is that having a day where you can focus on learning in the morning and the academic experience, but have time in the afternoons for activities, for service, for sport, and time was also just socially to come together at lunchtime and pause and share the fun of what is happening in the school. All of that seems to really bring out the best for boys in our experience, and is why the house structure and the boarding ethos of the school lends itself so well to the boys then fulfilling what they're capable of.
I suppose preserving their childhood for a little bit longer, building their confidence, possibly slightly less sophisticated in the sense that they can really be themselves. So they're having a pretty grotty day and they're aged 14, that's absolutely fine, and they're surrounded by lots of lovely friends who are feeling the same. They don't have to feel they've got to look a particular way, to behave in a particular way. They can just be themselves, and they're not defined by their gender in any way. And I love that, actually. And the depth of friendship that they build is something very special. You get a real sense of sisterhood of girls when they grow up together, go through that journey together. They know each other incredibly well, and so that builds their confidence in them. They have that sense that anything is possible because all the role models around them are also wonderful young women and those who've gone before them. So it's about freedom, I think, and therefore it enables them, as I say, to build their confidence.
And grow up together, supporting each other. How do you ensure, obviously in a single-sex environment, that the children are able to mix with other boys or girls in their daily life, learning and activities during their time at the school?
This is really important for me because I come personally from a co-educational background, and, as a father with daughters and sons as well, very mindful that we're a school that is offering an education for boys, but with obviously preparing them and within a co-educational world. We're very lucky where we're located as well. We are in an area where there are lots of great schools, co-educational girls' schools, lots of schools in which to have very easy, accessible partnerships. So what does that really mean for us? Well, we have a particular relationship with Benenden through the boarding houses having links with Benenden. And because that's a prominent girls' school with boarding local to us, we do have lots of activities that we share with them. At the same time, though, as then actually also having, we believe, the benefit of being in a school which actually does also really kind of specialise in thinking about boys and giving them the chance to pursue the interests, that the enthusiasms they have without feeling that they're necessarily being judged about those choices because they're a boy.
We're really lucky because we have what we rather grandly call a strategic alliance with Radley College, which is a boys' school not too far away from us, and both Radley and Downe have a really strong commitment to work together so that the boys and the girls have an opportunity not just to socialise, but to work together, to collaborate together on projects of an academic nature as well. So just to give you a bit of an example, it's a student-led initiative. So the girls and the boys meet together in the sixth form, and they're called Respect Ambassadors, and they decide how they would like to build respectful, healthy relationships, what sort of activities would support that, and then the staff at both schools do their very best to make that happen. So we probably since September have done over 80 events together, and that might be just a simple going out doing pizza and bowling, or it might be doing an art workshop, or it might be a geography curriculum day for year 9 for what we call the upper 4, doing a humanities symposium. So all sorts of things that mean they're building friendships with the boys, have lots of time together, but also come back to a space which is theirs for the girls. And we're doing the same for our year 7 and 8 with Ludgrove Prep School. That's a similar sort of partnership. they're slightly scaled back to allow the girls to settle in. And so I hope they get probably really well thought through opportunities to mix. And we actually really talk about what does a healthy relationship look like? Should men and women treat each other at work? What does that look like in terms of respect and listening? And so we don't shy away from some of the difficult issues, as well as having fun and playing mixed hockey matches and things as well.
Dominic and Stephen, you both offer co-ed boarding experiences. What benefits do you feel the children experience through the co-educational provision that you offer?
So one of the fantastic things about being able to offer co-educational boarding is I think you get the best of both worlds. The world is, after all, a co-educational, or rather a mixed world. What we feel about that is we're preparing young women and young men for the rest of their lives, and they get to be part of the community of 600 boys and girls here together in the school. And they do most things together. They eat together, they have lessons together, they sometimes even play sport together. That's quite exciting to see too. Also, though, they do get these spaces to retreat to, their domestic spaces back in their houses where they are in that single-sex environment. So you've got that sense of fraternity or sorority, that sense of somewhere where they can retreat a little and not be under the gaze of the opposite sex. And those house units are really, really important. They are homes from home. It should be quasi-familial. It should be that place of comfort. So I think we get the sense of people being mixed up together for most of their living, as if they're kind of going to work and to play and so on, and then able to retreat and enjoy that. So you might have within a house at the weekend stuff that's just for that house, or they might invite another house around. They might be cooking together, watching a movie together, going out on an outing together, or something like that. So we get the kind of swerving between the two. And I absolutely rate schools that are just boys or just girls, but we like the fact that we can have the best of both worlds.
Stephen?
We consider it, most of our students come from primary or prep schools, which are co-educational. They'll be heading off to co-educational universities or the world of work after leaving us. And it's very much giving them the experience of normal life, particularly as we're a full boarding school and the majority of our students are here all of the time with just a handful of weekly boarders. We want them to have that experience of learning to work with, mix with, socialise with, play sport, be on the stage, play music with the opposite sex. We do have some single-sex activities. Last Saturday, I had the great joy of going to the Girls' House's 80s disco, which some of the music was, alas, a little bit more familiar to me than it was to them, but they had a great time. But then on Sunday, we had lots of mixed activities going on, mixed clubs and so on through the day. Everybody was in chapel together. It's that blend of some single-sex things, but very much the sort of normal life that they will experience both before they've come here and once they've left us thereafter.
And Stephen, could you just, for the listeners, clarify the difference, particularly with your provision, of what a state boarding school actually means and entails?
Yes, certainly. We're a state school, so with the education that we provide is funded by the government. So they're kind enough to pay for the teaching and the teachers and what goes on in the classroom. From the point of view of parents, therefore, what they're paying for when they come to the school is just for the boarding provision. And that means that our fees are very affordable in comparison to independent schools. And roughly speaking, it's about a third of the cost for full boarding compared to what people will be paying at some independent schools. We still have the very strong pastoral care that you'd experience in independent boarding. We have the wide range of activities through the evenings and weekends, supervised prep, lessons on Saturday mornings, etc. But it's the government who are kind enough to pay for the education elements. Parents are just paying for the boarding fee.
And what would a parent have to do to qualify for that? Is it to live locally or?
Yes, so the students that we can take are those who are British citizens or who've got the right to reside in the UK. So we do have some families who live overseas, but they're primarily expats who've got British passports and are perhaps working abroad, or with our military traditions, the military heritage of the school, perhaps they're based abroad with the army or one of the other forces. But the majority of those who are overseas are expats.
And why do you think that boarding is still an important provision for so many families in the modern day?
I mean, I found this fascinating because boarding for me has been a new experience coming to Tonbridge. And it's been fascinating to discover not only the kind of heritage of boarding, but also how boarding continues to evolve and develop. And that's something that's been very interesting, of course, thinking about the response to COVID and what seemed to be potentially a kind of almost existential crisis, not only for education in lots of ways, but in particular thinking around residential learning and the residential community. And if anything, what we found is it's reinforced, if you like, the relevance and the appeal of boarding, particularly when it's done in a modern and in a flexible way. I think for us, we see practical benefits that appeal to families. If it's a dual income family, it's increasingly kind of very much the norm. Both parents kind of working, pursuing their careers, and therefore actually wanting to enable their children to have as focused an experience as possible in school life without necessarily the disruption of travel, of commute, and the distraction of that, but being able to really centre themselves on their school lives in the week, but then have, if you like, more quality time when the families then come together, either kind of sharing the school experience because parents are here on the touchline or coming to listen to concerts or attend services or whatever it might be, or of course just having some time away from school at home to recharge a bit and just enjoy being together. So we see families who choose the school because they want their sons to have time together as friends. They want their sons to have access to the facilities, not just for formal timetable time, but outside of that, pursuing their own interests, their own initiative. And through that time that the boys are then having together at school, really achieving a depth of relationship and a quality of progress in their learning, which isn't always as easily possible if time is being given to the other practicalities of life.
I think it's the most, and of course I'm going to say this, but I think it is the most wonderful education in the sense that they learn a whole lot of skills. They learn to live with all sorts of people from all sorts of different countries, different backgrounds, different approaches. And they often say to me when they're out in the working world, they never worry about who they're going to work alongside because they've learned to live alongside a whole variety of different people. And it is a skill that you develop. How do I become more tolerant about the messy person when I'm really tidy? And how do we negotiate over who's having the window open? And those little things and the opportunities that boarding gives to them in terms of leadership in the boarding house, in terms of working with different age groups, has competitions, learning to lose graciously and win graciously as well. So I think those interpersonal skills, they really develop, and AI and all the changes that are going to be made, those interpersonal skills are going to be so important for them, those values that they learn. And to be honest, decency, being a good upstander who stands for strong values, they will also learn incredibly well in a boarding setting.
Boarding is important because it's a way of enriching and enhancing what families offer. Now, sometimes they're not in a position to do the day-to-day kind of logistics of life, and we can handle that. But more often, what people are after when they're looking for a boarding life is the sense that what we have to offer is so filled with a richness of opportunity to grow, to gain maturity, to gain skills, to gain access to all kinds of learning within the classroom without, that is just not possible for most families to offer their children. And there is this sort of awful thing for parents that actually, as a family man myself, you get to this point where you can see that your children are really loving it and happy at home. But there comes a point when they want the home life and they also want that sense of being amongst their peers and the buzz of that, which is really rather incredible. And going back to my previous answer about the best of both worlds, I think that modern boarding offers you that. I think it offers that kind of connectedness with family, and in fact takes the pressure off a lot of what happens in normal family life. There's a time to have really good, high quality time together, not the kind of homework nag on a Sunday evening almost. Or some of the other tricky stuff, dealing with the trickier bits of teenage life. I'm not saying that doesn't go home. But we're expert in helping people engage with those difficulties of what teenage life brings, challenges, joys, and so on. And we're also there to say, right, you haven't got to do the day-to-day commute to school for these children. You haven't got to worry about, are they going to be properly occupied and helped with their homework in the evening? Because there's adults here that will do that for them. You haven't got to worry, are they in a safe environment when they're interacting with their peers socially outside lesson times and so on. And there's also, in modern boarding, I think certainly in my school, a real sense of cosmopolitanism. They get to meet different people. They get to meet people from a whole load of different backgrounds. The richness, the buzz, the excitement of being amongst their peers, as much as they are, gives them a set of skills which doesn't give them an unfair advantage, but it gets them kind of world ready, I guess, ready for when they go to university, when they go on to life after school.
And Stephen?
We see ourselves very much catering for busy families, perhaps through long working hours or having to commute and so on, that they perhaps can't spend the time that they would want with their youngsters during the working week. And we're able to offer the levels of care, the levels of provision to help look after the youngsters, to make sure that they aren't only getting the quality education through the classroom, but they're getting a lot of the other opportunities beyond the classroom, the all-round education that we pride ourselves on, the co-curricular opportunities, the sport, the music, the drama, things like Duke of Edinburgh, CCF, etc. And rather than parents having to worry about ferrying their children to and from different clubs and activities during the week and over the weekends, we're providing all of that here. And we offer very, very strong pastoral care that parents can feel content, can feel happy, can feel confident that their children are being looked after, and that there's support for their academic growth, their experience, to give them the different things that will provide the hinterland for them, we hope, after they've left school as well. And also the all-important support for well-being, which I think all boarding schools have been giving more focus to in recent years, which is something we really pride ourselves on. It's being able to provide the all-round education through evenings and weekends, support for academics, as well as the elements beyond the classroom as well.
How do you feel you're able to prepare children for life after school, giving them, I think it's an increasing discussion nowadays, kind of equipping them with life skills that they're going to need either at university or in the workplace?
I mean, I think one talks about the idea of the boys here for us kind of developing greater independence through the experience of boarding. And I think to a large degree that's true in the sense that the boys learn to kind of manage quite a range of an incredible range of activities, frankly, and of also of expectations and responsibilities that they are learning to manage kind of increasingly independently as they progress through the school. They're fortunate, of course, to have so much available on the one site, but on the other hand, to actually manage their time, be where they need to be, and enjoy taking those things to a high level and not just simply focusing on one particular interest or one particular enthusiasm, does require maturity of management of time, responsibility. So we certainly see the development there of that independence. But also, I think the management of relationships with others, learning to live together with a range of different people, building those relationships over time is a significant life skill that the boys develop. And also learning about themselves through that and learning, how to articulate how they're feeling, how things are going for them, and managing that in the context of the community life of a school.
One of the best bits about boarding is that you get time with them. And with that time, it enables you to give them more opportunities, really. So if I think about our sixth form, for example, but we build up to this all the way through school, we are able to do the very straightforward things of, giving them the right academic skills, independent study skills. We do a lot with them on how do you manage the transition into a new environment, your healthcare, your culinary skills, so how many of them can cook when they go out and leave us. So some really practical things around that, some practical things around well-being, and much underrated, but how do I look after myself in terms of sleep? Where do I go for help? It sounds daft, but actually sleep, exercise, good diet are really important skills to manage for life. And then we do a lot in terms of financial understanding. We do making sure that they know how to budget, making sure they know how to manage a student loan, what sort of accommodation they need, how do they make investments in later life. So we cover the financial things, practical well-being, and we do things like we run a mini MBA for them. We actually run the Ivy House leadership program. So things that are sort of connected to the real world and run by real world, if you like, as girls sometimes fondly call them, real people. who come in and run these courses for them as well, just to get them connected. And of course, you get them out doing community service and work experience. We have a global internship program. They can go and work in companies around the world. So I hope we're giving them quite a big exposure to life beyond Downe, as well as building their confidence in the here and now as well.
Right at the heart of how we function needs to be that sense of preparing people's life. So it's emotional, it's pastoral, it's intellectual, it's academic, but also there's that kind of broader sense of, as you just mentioned, careers, university, and so on. So first of all, we have a brilliant universities department which focuses on getting people to the absolutely best places they can go, whether that's in the UK or further afield. But there's also that sense of the practical skills you might need: cooking, cleaning properly, how you might polite conversation and get set up for a dinner party. Little things, but are also quite big things, that kind of social glue. And actually, one of the things we're doing is we're extending our provision further and further down the school to make sure those skills are kind of built in and embedded as they go up through, and we get to a kind of more mature launch point afterwards. School should be a really happy, joyful, I would say, experience in and of itself. That's our aim here. But it needs to be a springboard into the next phases of your life. And that's absolutely vital part of what we need to do.
And you also have the Lancing LinkedIn.
Yes, it's called Lancing Connected. So actually we have our own version of LinkedIn. And we have thousands and thousands of alumni, OLs as they're called, all linked back to us. And they come from an incredible diversity of professions of interest and so on, from Oscar-winning filmmakers to surgeons to business people to people who work in insurance to academics. I mean, really, you name it. It's incredibly exciting, very powerful alumni network. And, you know, the young people here at Lancing are linked in straight to them, direct to source.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Yes, one of the things we experience every year is that we have some of the students who've left us at the end of year 13, headed off to university and come back to see us, often around about Remembrance Sunday, which is a very big event for us here at the school. And they talk about some of the people they've encountered at university, at the next steps for them. And they say, oh, they haven't got over the whole living away from home thing yet. And our students are used to being away from home. They're used to looking after themselves. We look to provide the safety net whilst they're in the sixth form in particular, but all the way through the school as well, so that we can gradually withdraw that so that when they're reaching the point to move on to the next stage of education, or in some cases moving on to careers, they've got the resilience, they've got the skills of independence and being able to look after themselves when they do move on. We've just completed our Careers Week. We've got very, very strong careers links across the school. And one of the things that we're also able to offer is a mentoring program where we link students at the school with old boys and old girls in allied careers or areas of interest. And they can act as an informal sounding board, if you like, getting them ready for the sort of things they should be doing, building up the CV, looking at the things beyond simply the academic qualifications, the hints and tips that will help them go into the particular careers they're looking for.
And how do you feel you're able to provide international parents and families with a positive boarding experience?
Obviously, this is something we've been giving a lot of thought to over recent years because, incredibly mindful of the trust that families are placing in you as a school to send their children to another side of the world, trusting in the quality of education you're going to deliver, but also, of course, wanting to know their child's going to be happy, going to be safe, and that they're going to also be able to share in the experience that their child is having. So there are lots of ways in which we kind of look to facilitate and support that. And of course, it starts really right from the beginning when families are beginning to reach out to schools and where you're looking to develop that quality of relationship and connection right the way through the admissions journey, whether that's through online interaction, the opportunity to come and visit physically and see the school, and keeping in touch with news, and thus building a sense of confidence that this is a school that cares about you and cares about your child. But there are some important practical things which we know are really appreciated by families. We have, as well as, of course, the relationship with the master house mistress, matron, and the team of tutors, that the whole catering team with us, with house dining, that child really feeling that they're known, that their likes, their interests. It's also supported by having an international student liaison officer that we have, who is a very experienced former matron at the school who now supports boys who are coming internationally to the school. And that will extend to being there to help arrange kind of transport and so on when they're flying into the country, being a point of contact, a point of welcome. When we have exeat weekends, offering trips and activities, as well as, again, being another point of contact for families around the logistics of travel, which, to be honest, we think we do incredibly well. And that's what our families tell us. So we know that that's something where we can just offer a lot of reassurance.
We treat, I hope, all our families well, but our international families they need some extra TLC. And I hope it starts from almost the journey when they register, get accepted, and then you begin to sort of set up with them if they need a Tier 4 visa, how that's going to work, giving them time with the house mistress first, packing list, uniform, all those practical things. And if they can't come and do things like the New Girls Open Day that we run beforehand, we make sure that we do Teams calls or Zoom calls with the house mistress, with other children and the children coming in, so they get a bit of a sense of the school before they come. One of the great things that technology has allowed us to do is we use it to keep in contact with families, and that feels so much closer when you can have a Teams call with a family, so the tutors can do Teams calls, the staff can do those calls if parents can't get to a parents' meeting. So we'll try our very best to make sure that we're respectful of time zones. We make it easy for the girls to be in touch with their parents. And as I say, we use the technology to our advantage. I hope to make parents feel they're really connected to the school.
So Lancing, cosmopolitan place. We look and we feel terribly British. People sort of talk about it as a sort of Hogwarty, Harry Potter-esque sort of environment. You get that beauty, you get that traditional look. We're right by the sea. We're in the heart of the South Downs in the National Park. It's really beautiful here. But what people get here is a celebration of that kind of exciting diversity. So the people who come here from overseas, they're not just coming here to absorb a Britishness that's been set in aspic. They're here to come and have an impact themselves on the kind of dynamism and outward-looking nature of what Lancing is. And it kind of evolves and shifts with the nature of the population. So when we have something like Chinese New Year, that's a huge party for the whole school. It was fantastic a few weeks back. We have similar other events for all kinds of nations, different interests, and so on. People feel properly welcome, and they feel that they have a voice in shaping how the school works. And for example, I teach debating to all the Year 9 incoming students. I love that. And a big part of that, of course, is about thinking and presentation skills and argument. But it's also about getting everybody to listen to each other and listen to different perspectives and learn from those different perspectives and enjoy those differences and celebrate them. And I'd say that goes for the entire school population.
And Stephen?
Yes, for us, it's very much about connections, and that we are very keen for all parents, but particularly for those who are a long way away, either within the British Isles or without, for the connections with the housemaster or house mistress, the connections with the matrons in the boarding houses, the connections with the tutors who are looking after the academic progress of the students to be established. And it's very much part of an ongoing dialogue that we want to be keeping parents informed as to how their sons and daughters are getting on. And we want to be getting feedback from them as well as to things that we can do, that we can improve to make sure that their children go on to achieve of their best in all of the different spheres of activity that they have here at the school.
Everyone's obviously talking about it. It's a big topic in education at the moment, the independent schools and the fact that many are VAT exempt. And obviously if Labour win the next election, then VAT is likely to be introduced, which could impact schools and fees. What's your view on this, James?
I think, within the sector, we're being realistic about the fact that this is a policy that Labour are talking about quite strongly, and it's clear that this is something they're thinking very seriously about introducing. Clearly, we're keen to counter that, as I'm sure all schools are in the sector, and we're very keen to make sure that the opportunity of education at Tonbridge is something which is as accessible as it can be. And we've been growing our foundation award programme, our bursary programme, and boarding is a big part of the offer of that experience and the transformational experience it can provide. And we're absolutely committed to continuing with that, but obviously in a way that is also sustainable. And as a result, we're looking at taking specialist advice as a school, and as the sector is, we are looking at ways in which we can maximise non-fee income. It's something which, schools have been developing through commercial activities. Some schools have developed that through international families. And it's certainly an area where we're looking to build on the things that we have been doing to try and minimise the impact for our parents, because we're very keen to sustain the balance of school that we are, both the quality of school that we are and also the balance that we have of boarding day, of local, UK, international, because we think that really works well. So that's foremost in our minds as we come into this period, but, with a degree of sobriety as well.
Gosh, yeah, there's no doubt it's an issue for the independent sector, and it's certainly been occupying us all in terms of our thinking. And we've known it's going to be on the horizon probably for a little while, and our approach to it has been, I think, probably threefold. Really. One is to say, actually, we know there's a huge hike and you can't just suddenly take boarding fees up by 20% for parents. So we have to look and say, how do we control our costs as efficiently as we can without devaluing the quality of the education? And we've been working hard to, like a lot of my colleagues, on generating a variety of other revenue for the school. So that would be through using the site here to generate revenue. We have 2 overseas campuses where we hope we're making a difference in the places where they are, and that's the key priority. But also, of course, the revenue generated from those comes back into the school to help, I hope, mitigate some of those costs later on. So we're going to continue to do all we can to expand that revenue generation, keep us as lean and trim as we can in terms of our costs, and make sure that everything we're doing is relevant and we manage it as effectively as we can for the parents.
I think we need to be really pragmatic about this. Parents are not as flexible and as infinitely elastic in their ability to commit money to school fees as the Labour Party would seem to think. If it's going to come, and at the moment, who knows, but at the moment it's looking quite likely, we've been making plans about it, very careful and considered plans. I think there's no doubt that there will have to be some fee rise which takes account of it, but I doubt it would be a full 20% here, because we're doing 2 things alongside working out how we minimise that fee rise. One is about cost control and making sure that the school is doing things efficiently and not taking parents for granted. We're not splashing money around because parents just can't be expected to pay for everything. It's in my mind anyway, that kind of pressure on parents. Inflation's been running very high, hasn't it? And it's a really tricky thing. So cost control in the school. And also, we're already really good at this, but generating money from sources which aren't just parent fees. And we have a commercial director here who's got a very, very strict set of targets to generate finances from other directions. So I think it could be a little bit bumpy for a while, but we are committed to working with our families, to making sure that any fee rises are well planned, are well advertised, and that they will be as low as they possibly can be, while bearing in mind the government is choosing, well, it would seem the new government would be choosing to impose a 20% tax. So with that in mind, we will be working very hard to minimise the impact on parents and working with them. We know how hard parents work to try to raise the funds for fees. And I am desperately keen that we keep the really brilliant range of families.
And Stephen, I'm not sure how much it would impact you specifically.
No, as a state school, we don't fall within the scope of VAT, and we aren't expecting that to change.
Final question. How do you see the future of boarding schools? It's a constant discussion, isn't it? Changing in the next decade.
We were speaking a moment ago about the VAT, and this is a point at which you start kind of thinking about what are the real principles that you're committed to as a school. And of course, nobody wants, and we certainly don't want here at Tonbridge, to kind of compromise the quality of educational experience that we're providing. At the heart of that, we believe, is that the boarding ethos of the school. It's something that really differentiates us as a school locally and internationally, we think, in the mix of pupils we have, but all of whom are committing to and benefiting from the ethos of boarding. So committing to world-class boarding is really important, and that's something that's a priority for us. But what does that world-class boarding look like is interesting. And I think, what do I see kind of happening? I suspect we're going to see a greater flexibility, and we're probably seeing that already kind of coming into the different approaches and styles of boarding that are available. But I think we'll see greater kind of flexibility, probably greater personalisation around some of the curriculum, which might also be another dimension of the way in which schools kind of operate. But we've saw a lot of innovation through the pandemic period, whether that mixture of online, the supercurricular enrichment alongside the more traditional delivery of learning. I'm sure we'll see elements of that come into boarding too.
Mikey, that's $1 million question. Boarding needs to continue to evolve because that is really important for it. So I hope what boarding will do is continue to provide that immersive, all-encompassing education. But I think probably it'll become a little bit more flexible for many in terms of how parents can access that, in terms of the full boarding, etc. So I think pretty much all schools will recognise that that is necessary for parents and for family life. I hope it will use the time that it has to the best advantage, being outward looking, actually. I think I would like to see boarding schools using that time to engage with the community. I hope too that we really focus on engaging the local communities in with the schools, because we're really well placed to do that in terms of involving local schools in our school, just to make sure that it is as open, outward looking and as grounded as it can be, because boarding education is expensive, but we really do want our young people to have a sense of service and, as I say, to use the time as well as we can to ensure that that message is firmly there, that they're giving back to their local communities. So I hope, as I say, it'll be flexibility, responding to family need, still providing a broad education, but also making sure that we use the time as well as we can just to upskill it. And again, not to overplay it, or I'm not sure one can overplay artificial intelligence actually, but I think the impact that that is going to have on the working world, I hope will make boarding schools even better placed to teach young people the things they really need and give them exposure to those things.
I think things are going to continue to change. I think we work in partnership really effectively with our parents. I think the nature of those partnerships will continue to evolve as family needs change. COVID had a big impact on how effectively we all communicate. It was awful in so many ways, of course, but also enabled us to do a lot more about how they're working together with families, taking on that enormous trust of looking after people's sons and daughters. There's going to be all kinds of exciting stuff once we get through that potential big financial VAT bump. But I think the underpinning characteristics of what boarding offers, excellence academically, excellence in the co-curricular sphere, fantastic preparation for life in practical ways, and that underpinning sense of something that's sort of dynamic and buzzy, a real gold standard education. That's how we're regarded around the world. We offer the best all-in, fully focused, properly rounded, properly holistic engagement with young people is a wonderful start in life. And those underpinning principles, certainly here at Lancing, of making sure that people are going out into the world determined to make a positive difference, all the practicalities and the pragmatic stuff, that will evolve and shift, but that will remain unchanged. And frankly, the kind of joy and excitement of what it is to be part of a boarding community.
And Stephen?
I think there are a lot of points that are going to be the elements of continuity, that whilst there are parents that are looking for strong pastoral care, parents looking for strong academic results, looking for well-being and to offer the all-round education, the strong co-curricular programme, that's going to remain as the constant. And I've always worked in boarding schools, and looking back from the start of my career, there have been different emphases at different times. And some parts of school life have received more attention, and certainly I think the big thing that has hugely developed is just the concern and interest for the individual, allied with the contact with parents. It's difficult to predict. May you live in interesting times. It's difficult to predict exactly how things are going to change in the coming years. But I'm fairly confident that boarding schools are going to remain, that boarding schools that are caring for individuals, that are looking to develop individuals and prepare them for the next steps are still going to be there. And I'm fairly sure that the all-round education, that going beyond the classroom, is something that people will continue to value in the future.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today. And I think that the future of boarding schools is certainly looking increasingly exciting with all the many changes taking place.